What's going on, guys? Johnny Bandon, the networking guru. Today, we got 50 Security Plus SY0-701 questions going over domain 4. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. If you want access to our learning management system, our full self-paced Security Plus course, hit that link in the description below. Let's get started. So I'm at my learning management system here. Now let's go to our domain 4 questions. So I'm going to click on quizzes. I'm going to search up here for just domain 4, and we got 50 SY0-701 questions. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to zoom in here. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's do it. So question 1. After receiving hundreds of low priority alerts for failed logins on a test server, the security team decides to reduce alert noise while preserving visibility. Which of the following best describes this activity? That is going to be B, alert tuning. So essentially, we just want to make sure that our alerts are coming in how we want them and properly. And we didn't want any alert noise. So we're saying, hey, we're getting too much on this low priority alerts that are not like severe enough for us to, call in a technician, whatever the case may be. So when we're changing that up, we call that alert tuning. Question 2. A vulnerability scan reveals a software flaw with a CVSS base score of 9.8. What does this indicate, and how should the security team respond? Now, this question, again, is just very, there's not a lot of nuance to it, right? Because it's not saying, oh, we got a software flaw on our e-commerce server that 9.8, so how do we attack that versus maybe like a printer that's just in a random, spoke office. And what I mean by that is that e-commerce server that maybe that is our one profit generating thing that we have in our organization, or maybe not the one, but the main. We're not just going to contain and isolate that because there's a high CVSS score for a vulnerability on there. We may have to take our time, give with stakeholders and say, hey, we're taking this thing down that gives our company money. They're going to say, oh, well, probably not, right? But what does this indicate? That's an easy question. It indicates that we have a very high vulnerability because that CVSS score, and what that stands for is a common vulnerability scoring system, is a way numerically or quantitatively we can say, hey, this is very severe because it's a score of 0 through 10, right? So this is damn near the most severe, right? So it's a critical vulnerability that should be remediated immediately. Now, again, if there was more nuance to this, it's not always remediate immediately, but as a good just base thing to do if you see the high vulnerabilities to fix it, right? For a simple Sec Plus test where we're going to be that simple cybersecurity analyst that's not making those high level decision makings and, disaster recovery and incident response. We're not making the policy, I should say. It's going to be, we fix it immediately, right? So it says B there, but the correct answer is D. I'll make sure to fix that. Okay, question 3. A development team wants to identify coding flaws such as buffer overflows and hard-coded credentials before deploying an application. Which of the following is the best technique to use during the development phase? So we want to see our application in a runtime environment and see how it reacts to these attacks that will attack the actual application, right? Coding flaws such as buffer overflow and hard-coded credentials. I'm going to go with dynamic application analysis. And okay. Yeah, let's see here. I do not like this question at all. So let me go through over this again. So static application analysis is when we do source code analysis. So what I mean by that is you and another senior engineer look at the code, just like in your IDE, so in Visual Studio Code, and you're just combing through it line by line, right? Looking over the methods, the functions, and what you have, the third-party libraries, and looking for any security flaws. So that's why I was like, the hard-coded credentials, that would be discovered during static application analysis, where we can go see, oh, this REST API we built that's reaching out, the credentials are there, right? That authenticates us to that API, whatever API we're trying to hit, right? Whatever API and the service we're trying to hit. but buffer overflow is a memory-based attack, right? Um, that typically, if you're testing a buffer overflow, you would do something called fuzzing. You'd have a fuzzer that's testing that application in a runtime environment. And when you do that, we call that dynamic application analysis. But I guess it is possible to look to see if your memory allocation is wrong in your source code. And that's what the buffer overflow is. It's a memory thing, right? So I'm guessing that's why it chose B as a more correct answer. Let's read the explanation. Static application analysis, also known as static code analysis, involves reviewing source code or compiled binaries without executing them. Okay. It is most effective during development for detecting vulnerabilities like input validation errors, insecure functions, and credentials hard-coded in code. So it's, it doesn't really address, this question doesn't really address the buffer overflow. I would think you test that in a runtime environment. But I guess the hard-coded credentials, you can only look at that for static application analysis. So, okay, I get it, be there. Let's move on. Question 4. A vulnerability in a public-facing web application has a CVSS base score of 6.5, but the organization classifies it as a high priority due to the potential for data loss. Which of the following best explains this decision? So I'm going to go with D here. CVSS scores are inaccurate for internal threats. No. The vulnerability is a false negative and requires reclassification. No. And the CVE references must always override CVSS scores. No, CVSS scores, they score a CVE, right? A common vulnerability enumeration number. It's just the number we give the vulnerability, and the CVSS score kind of, that's the quantitative value we give to how severe it could be, right? But yes, the environmental organization factors, so what we perceive it. So whatever this is, we have a public facing web application, that's a 6.5. So if this was like an internal web application that was like isolated and only for our internal network, maybe we wouldn't care as much, right? Maybe we say, hey, yeah, there's this vulnerability, but only an insider threat can exploit it. So we kind of, when it comes to an attack surface, it's internal, so our attack surface isn't as large as this vulnerability would be on a public-facing web server. So we classify this as an organization as this is a high priority for us, even though the CVSS score is somewhere between medium to high, okay? And we do that because of the environmental and organizational factors around this vulnerability on the system. Question 5. An organization wants to allow users to authenticate once and gain access to multiple third-party cloud services using their corporate credentials. Which of the following technologies would best support this goal? So we're doing some sort of federation, right? Delivering some sort of single sign-on experience. So let's see here. Authenticate once and access multiple third-party. So it's not going to be C or D. That's not these are not, well, LDAP is part of an authentication sequence or part of authenticating, Active Directory uses LDAP, but I wouldn't say that's a federation, an SSO technology. Really the only thing that's delivering SSO or federation here is going to be A or B, OAuth or SAML, but more accurately, this is going to be SAML with identity federation, pretty much saying we're using an identity provider, right? A single identity provider to then access multiple third parties. Okay, so SAML. A good example of like SAML is you using like your university's email to access Office 365. So we have that single identity provider, which is your university's email, that's giving you and granting you access to like third party services like Office 365. Question 6. An organization wants to strengthen login security by requiring something the user knows and something the user has. Which of the following solutions best satisfies this requirement? So something you know is going to be something you make up, username, password, pins, and something you have is something that was either issued to you or something on a physical device or something physical. Smartphone, smart card, a physical token. So we're going to go with B here. That's the two factors here, a password and a smart card. Password being something you know and something you have being the smart card. Question 7. A financial institution restricts system access to employees only during their scheduled shifts between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Which access control method is being implemented? This one's easy. That's going to be time of day restrictions, right? Kind of right in our face right there, right? If you can only access between these times of the day, that's a time of day restriction. Question 8. Which of the following practices most directly supports identifying rogue devices on an enterprise network? So, which of the following practices most directly supports? That's what I'm saying. Like, these these CompTIA exams, I feel like the questions are more about English comprehension than they are cybersecurity. Not more, I should say, but it's very much a English comprehension test as well as it is understanding cybersecurity fundamentals. Get back to this question. I'm going to go with A here. Most directly supports identifying rogue devices on an enterprise network is going to be maintaining an up-to-date inventory, so knowing exactly what you have and using active asset discovery. And when you discover something that's not in your inventory that you know is accurate, you're going to know someone added something to your network, a rogue device. So we're going to go with A. Explanation down below. Question 9. Which of the following tools provides a standardized method to evaluate system configurations against known security baselines using automated scans? So I'm thinking SCAP here, and that's going to be the Security Content Automation Protocol. It's what I use in my day job to get my Linux servers in compliance with our government standards. So yes, I'm going to go with SCAP, the Security Content Automation Protocol. Uses a baseline and uses that baseline to harden or to tell you what you need to harden on a device. Question 10. A vulnerability in a cloud application is classified as medium severity. However, due to the organization's low risk tolerance and strict compliance requirements, leadership insists it be patched immediately. Which of the following best explains this decision? A and C is what I'm already looking at, right? So exposure factor is irrelevant. No. I thought it said is relevant. So I no longer think it's going to be A. I think it's going to be C here, and that is the industry/organizational impact and risk tolerance outweigh severity scores. So yeah, it's like this is this organizational decision, right? It's personal for the organization that we remediate. Pause the video, like to read the explanation. Question 11. A security analyst is investigating a data exfiltration incident. Which of the following log types would most likely reveal the external IP address the internal system was communicating with during the attack? So we're looking for pretty much like a network flow here. Like what device would be logging our network flows? C could, but I think more accurately a firewall, right? Because a firewall is permitting inbound, outbound to inbound. So if anything's taking artifacts, getting history of that, it's going to be a firewall in these options. Question 12. A security administrator needs to restrict HTTP traffic to a web server so that only specific IP addresses can access it. Which of the following is the best method to implement this using the firewall? HTTP is going to be port 80. For whatever reason, we need to access something to HTTP, right? This is a, cybersecurity exam, so why not? But the best way to do that is just apply an ACL, right? Apply an ACL, which is the thing that does the filtering on firewalls and routers, and you can do it based off a port, protocol, or an IP address. So we're going to go with D. Apply an access control list specifying allowed IPs for TCP port 80. Question 13. Which of the following methods would best help an organization detect unpatched software and misconfigured services across its networked systems? So it's not going to be static application analysis. Remember, we already talked about that source code in a non-runtime environment. Vulnerability scanning is, that's what I'm going to go with off the top of my head, right? A vulnerability scan, because that's going to be an active, passive, credential, non-credentialed scan that connects to different things on our network and gives us information. So I'm going to go with B, vulnerability scanning. Question 14. A new employee has joined the organization. The IT team assigns them a user account, adds them to appropriate groups, and enables access to necessary applications. Which of the following best describes this process? I mean, they're creating accounts and assigning permissions. So it's like, we're onboarding a new employee. So what are we doing? We're provisioning resources, provisioning things for him or her. So I'm going to go with D, provisioning. Question 15. An analyst discovers that a workstation has been infected with a remote access Trojan, a rat. The security team disables the network interface and starts forensic imaging. Which phase of the incident response is being executed? So they discover it, they're stopping it, they disable the network interface, they're containing it. So we're going to go with containment here for this phase of incident response. Question 16. In a cloud environment, an organization uses automation scripts to prevent developers from launching unapproved services or deploying configurations that violate security policies. What is this concept called? So we're using scripts, using automation scripts to prevent developers. So we're closing them off. We're putting a guard around them. So I'm going to go with guardrails. It's definitely not A, B, or D, right? Those wouldn't make sense. So I'm going to go with guardrails. Which of the following best describes an activity performed during the preparation phase of the incident response plan? So preparation phase, right? That's everything you do before. That's your defense in-depth planning. That's your approach to guarding and safeguarding your network, looking over your different risk management and cybersecurity management frameworks like NIST RMF, NIST CSF. It's making sure you have good remediation steps planned, right? So I'm going to go with B here, developing and updating incident policies and playbooks. So yeah, it's prepping. It's let's make sure our playbooks are accurate. Let's make sure our response is accurate in what we should do. Let's do some training exercise, whatever the case may be, right? That's all going to be in the preparation phase. So the answer is B, developing and updating incident response policies and playbooks. Question 18. An organization relies heavily on a single orchestration server to manage its automated patching, provisioning, and incident response playbooks. Which of the following best describes a security concern with this setup? So it's going to be C or D, right? On a single orchestration server, though, not even in a HA pair with any redundancy, that's a single point of failure, right? Anything that says you only have a single device that's doing a critical function, come on, that's single point of failure, right? That is too easy. Question 19. Which of the following combinations of tools would best detect both unauthorized outbound data transfers and abnormal network traffic patterns? So we need to detect unauthorized and abnormal. So abnormal traffic patterns, I'm automatically thinking that we're taking baselines and we're able to see something against the baselines. But then data transferring or data exfiltration would be DLP. So abnormal traffic patterns, we would detect that with some sort of network packet capturing, something that's active and maintains, that's NetFlow. SIEM could do this as well, depending how we set it up. But SCAP doesn't do either. Antivirus doesn't do either. SNMP wouldn't. SNMP could, detect abnormal traffic patterns, but it's not really looking at flows like NetFlow would. And then D just doesn't make sense, benchmarking and scanning. So yeah, we're going to go with B, data loss prevention and NetFlow. Question 20. A Windows administrator wants to ensure that all domain joined workstations automatically lock after 10 minutes of inactivity. Which of the following is the best method to enforce this across the enterprise? Let's say a group policy, right? We're probably going to want a group policy that says, have a timeout when there's no user enabled process running or something like that, right? So, because we could have things running that could maybe, but anyways, yeah. It's going to be a group policy, right? Group policy is how we can push things out to our, on-prem Windows endpoints that are on a on-prem Active Directory deployment forest. Okay, question 21. Which of the following is the most significant benefit of using automation in incident response workflows. I'm going to go probably with C here. What does automation do? It simplifies, well, once we create the automation, it's supposed to simplify things for us, right? When it comes to networking. But if we want to do automation for cybersecurity threats, it's so we can be more proactive or quicker to our reaction. So we're going to go with C. Improves reaction time to threats. Question 22. Which of the following access control models best fits an organization that requires users to access only the files and systems based on their job functions with permissions centrally managed by administrators? That's role-based, right? Their role. We're giving permissions based off their job, their role in their organization. So that's going to be RBAC, role-based access control. Question 23. Why is asset classification an essential step in assigning ownership and applying security controls? So, we say legal ownership. Really, asset classification is to make sure, how we protect it, right? How severe, not severe, but how hardened do we have to be, right? How much confidentiality, how much protections do we need? So I'm going to go with D here. Determines the level of protection required based on sensitivity. Question 24. Which of the following tools is best suited for aggregating logs from multiple? It's SIME. I'm not even going to read it. Log aggregation, guys, is SIME, Security Information and Event Management Systems. They do data aggregation, specifically log aggregation. Question 25. An analyst investigates an alert triggered by an intrusion detection system, but after review finds no evidence of malicious activity. Which of the following best describes the situation? So an alert triggered us. We reviewed it, and it actually was nothing malicious. That's a false positive, right? False positive. That's one of our flags that we don't want, right? So after this, we do some alert tuning. Question 26. An organization is retiring several servers and wants to reuse the hardware internally. Which of the following data disposal techniques is most appropriate before reassigning the servers? Not, just like real world, we do this. We say we want to just wipe it, we want to get everything off of there and repurpose it. And, that's sanitization. That's the term that CompTIA is going to use. You may not hear it, like we need to, I guess, yeah, sanitize that, the server. So that could involve, putting in new RAM even. I've seen that before, but getting rid of the hard drive maybe, or cleaning the hard drive at least, Let me say clean, get rid of everything on there. Question 27. An administrator is configuring remote access for a Linux server. Which of the following combinations would provide the most secure remote access method? So it's D, right? I'm not even going over other ones. Everything else is coming across the network in plain text. FTP and HTTP are not remote management protocols. Telnet is, but it's plain text with no protections. SSH is encrypted, has data in transit encryption. Question 28. Which of the following best describes the security benefit of a formal IT procurement process? So a formal IT procurement process is going to allow us to do some good investigations on our vendors, good change management, and it's going to allow us to do some due diligence, right? And that we're vetting where we're getting things. So it's going to be C. It ensures that all assets are vetted for compliance and security risks. Compliance being whatever rules you have to abide by. If it's in the government, if it's different healthcare, financial industries, their governance, their rules, their laws. Question 29. An organization wants to centralize the analysis of logs from its web servers. SIME again. Did it twice, right? Okay, moving on. Definitely gonna adjust that. Because this is pretty much like almost my Q&A for you guys, right? Before I put these questions live on our learning management system, I do this video and I'm like, okay, I have to go back and adjust. So that's probably one I'll get rid of again. It's a little redundant. Anyways, question 30. Which of the following best describes the purpose of performing regular attestation in an identity and access management system? So we're saying in our IAM system, so whatever that may be, if it's Active Directory, if it's in the cloud using Azure Enter ID, how do we do attestation? Or not how do we do it, what's the purpose? Why, right? Why do we do attestation? Which pretty much means how are we verifying integrity? How are we making sure that the integrity is good, that nothing has been assigned to this user account, these service accounts that they shouldn't have. So it's going to be B, to verify that assigned permissions are still appropriate. We don't want permission creep, right? And that's what our attestation is. It's a formal review process Question 31. Which of the following best describes the purpose of a data destruction certificate in an enterprise environment? So, I mean, again, data destruction certificate, where are we getting this from? Is it something internal, something from an auditor? But essentially, it's just saying we did it. We destroyed the data correctly, and it's not there anymore. And we have proof. So we're going to go with C. It documents and verifies that sensitive data has been securely destroyed. Question 32. Which of the following best describes a tabletop exercise in the context of incident response testing? So a tabletop exercise. Okay, so incident response testing. Pretty much when we say incident response testing, that's our exercises that we do to make sure our incident response plan is working. It's good, it's valid, that everyone understands their roles, and there's many different exercises we can do. Ones that are active, that are going to disrupt the network, ones that maybe are sandboxed, but with still on a live system. When we say live, just a system. Or we have tabletop exercises where it's a roundtable discussion essentially. So that's going to be B, an interactive discussion-based review of roles and responses to a hypothetical incident. Pretty much get around this table and, hey, Joe from accounting, hey, Susan from HR, what are y'all doing during this? That's a tabletop exercise. Question 33. Two organizations are affected by the same vulnerability. One decides to patch immediately while the other defers remediation. What factor is most likely influencing the differing responses? So again, this is getting into like our organizational values, right? When it comes to vulnerabilities, how organizations can look at vulnerabilities a lot differently based on their risk appetite. So we're going to go with C here. One organization has a lower risk tolerance. That's it. One has lower, one has a higher, so they respond to things differently, even though they may have the same cybersecurity issue or problem. Question 34. An endpoint detection system generates a high severity alert indicating ransomware behavior. Which of the following actions represents an immediate and appropriate alert response technique? So we have a high severity alert. Let's see. So tune the alert to suppress. No, this one we need. Archive, that's not going to be the immediate response. And we're not going to just reboot immediately. And that, unless that is part of your instant response, I'm gonna go with C. Place the affected endpoint in a network quarantine, right? Quarantine it so we can maybe stop the spread of that ransomware, but we still need to get in there and, you know, before we just reboot. That's bad digital forensics because we may lose things that are in the cache, and cache memory that we need to like dump out before we reboot. All right, question 35. An intrusion prevention system, IPS, is triggering multiple alerts for known benign application traffic. Which of the following actions should the administrator take to reduce false positives while maintaining security visibility? So I'm going to go, I think I'm going to go with B here because we just need to fix the alert tuning, right? And maybe update like what they should be looking for, right? So yeah, B, update IPS signatures and tune detection rules. Question 36. During an investigation of a ransomware incident, which combination of logs would best help determine how the malware was executed and what files were encrypted? So ransomware incident. So I'm guessing, this question again, I don't really particularly love. We have a ransomware incident. So we need logs. So at the end of the day, we need some historics. We need to look at what happened. So I am going to go with, with ransomware, that's not something that's on the network, right? What I mean by that, it's not doing, the ransomware may be doing data exfiltration, but it's not something we're going to look at in our NetFlow logs, right? It's not going to be something that is going to be stored in metadata. It's not going to be necessarily on third-party logs either, third-party application logs. Maybe it is, but a typical ransomware where they're encrypting your files, right, and asking for money, so making things unavailable, that's going to be, in my opinion, on endpoints. So I'm going to go with D, endpoint logs and OS-specific security logs. Question 37. An analyst reviews IDS logs and notices repeated attempts to access a non-existing URL on the company's public web server. Which type of threat is most likely indicative of? Ooh, it's a big word, indicative. Okay, so we are seeing in the IDS logs attempts to a URL. that is not there, a non-existent URL. So that's just someone probing us, right? I was gonna say maybe, directory traversal. That really wouldn't make sense. Directory traversal is more specific. This is just a non-existent URL. So we're just trying to see, what responses we're getting, what kind of HTTP response we're gonna get. We're probing that device. Question 38. Which of the following best describes a centralized web filtering solution that inspects and controls users' access to web content based on URL categories? Okay, so we have centralized web filtering. This for some reason doubled. Okay, it's sometimes a little bug I have in my system. I just gotta go in and edit this again. But yes, that's gonna be centralized web filtering solution. So that's going to be a proxy. So that's one of the things like an inside proxy can do is it can pretty much do like deep inspection and break down that TLS session you have, your HTTPS session, inspect, rebuild that session for you and send you out your way. That's what an inside proxy can do. It can also do like network address translation, and we can set up our proxies that are, our inside, our forward proxies, I guess you would call them, right? And we can set up filtering on them as well. So that's going to be centralized proxy with URL scanning and content categorization. Question 39. Which of the following best explains how APIs support automation and secure operations? So APIs just allow us to reach out and do requests, talk to something, talk to a database, talk to a centralized identity provider, a centralized server. It exchanges data, right? Between, different tooling, different architectures. So we're going to go with a B here. APIs allow applications to automatically exchange and act on data. Question 40. An organization needs to deploy smart sensors throughout its manufacturing plant. Which of the following hardening techniques is most appropriate for securing these embedded systems? So we have these smart sensors here that we need to harden. So the best thing to do with this, you're not going to be able to put antivirus or EDR on there. We just got to harden it the simplest way we know how, just disabling things, right? Disabling ports, protocols, disabling local admins. So we're going to go with A, disabling unused services and interfaces. Question 41. A security team suspects that a system is communicating with a known malicious IP address. Which of the following data sources would best help verify the contents and destination of the communication? So we want to look at the destination and the contents. For here, the best way to do that is just a packet capture, right? Do some sort of man in the middle, right, on ourselves. Do a TCP dump on a server. Do some span and get the whole packet and then inspect that packet. Question 42. Which of the following best describes the benefit of using automation for user provisioning in a secure enterprise environment? Well, that's going to prevent a lot of errors, right? It's going to help our provisioning by always putting the right permissions too, so we don't get that permission creep through human error, right? There's so many reasons why we want to automate the provisioning, but here our best answer is going to be B. It enforces consistent and timely assignment of access rights. Question 43. Which of the following best describes the purpose of establishing a secure baseline in a computing environment? So a secure baseline, that's going to be B, to define a known secure configuration for systems. Question 44. A vulnerability scan identifies a high severity issue on a production server. Upon manual inspection, the system administrator finds that the reported vulnerability is not actually present. That's going to be a false positive. We had another question earlier like this, so this is definitely something I'm going to adjust before I deploy this live on our site. But yes, that is a false positive. When something alerts you that it's malicious and in fact it's not, right? So your systems need to fix the alert turning or how they're scanning and detecting. Question 45. Which of the following email security technologies helps prevent spoofing by verifying that an email was sent by an authorized mail server for a given domain? So that's going to be the sender policy framework. It's those SPF, what would you even call it? You put it on your DNS entries, your SPF entries. So SPF, sender policy framework, allows domain owners to specify which IP address or mail servers are authorized to send emails. And there's already like pre-built lists for that of like good domains and pre-built lists for like blacklisted domains as well that you can help you when you're filtering out spam and malicious emails coming into your network across your email server, right? Question 46. Which of the following actions best supports hardening cloud infrastructure as part of a secure baseline? So hardening cloud infrastructure is always going to be, guys, starting with your IAM. That's like your boundary in the cloud. Um, that's that's like the new boundary for the cloud, IAM, Identity Access Management. It's who has access, and are we stopping anyone from getting into our cloud console or cloud portal? It all starts with the identity and how we're protecting that identity. So we're going to go with C, applying role-based access control to cloud resources. Who can access what, and how are we protecting that? Question 47. Which of the following is most critical to maintain when collecting digital evidence during an investigation to ensure it is admissible in legal proceedings? That's going to be our chain of custody, making sure that we're handing off our data that's going to be part of these digital forensics that could be in court properly with the right paperwork and the right integrity. Question 48. Why is conducting a lessons learned session an important part of the incident response plan? So lessons learned, right? That is going to be where we tune and we get better and we fix things in our incident response or in our preparation that could have prevented this or help us just improve our processes. So we're going to go with B. It supports tuning of monitoring systems and improving future response. Question 49. Which of the following best describes a bug bounty program? That is a program that says, from organizations, we'll pay you if you can, break into our stuff. If you can discover a vulnerability, we'll pay you. So it's a reward-based program for external researchers to report security flaws. It's going to be D. Last question. Let's go. Let's get this one right, and we'll get like a 98% because I messed up that first question in the video. A healthcare organization is reviewing its data retention policy. Which of the following considerations is most important when determining how long to keep patient records? So most important, check out HIPAA, right? So yeah, we're gonna, what's your compliance? What does the industry standards say? When we say standard, we mean something that actually is governing the way you deploy, monitor, and secure systems. So we're gonna go with B here, industry regulations and legal compliance. All right, awesome guys. We are done. So we got a 98%. I mean, that to me, that's passing. I hate when I miss up a question. I don't see any red here though, so now I'm happy. I want to thank everyone for viewing. And again, make sure you like, subscribe, share with your friends. And if you're interested in purchasing our full Security Plus course, hit that link in the description below. I'll see you in the next video.